You are listening to Off Planet Radio at offplanetradio.com.
Yeah, there's some drums. All right, just because it's dark and cold outside doesn't mean we can't heat it up a little bit, eh? And welcome to the Solstice 2019 show. I'm Randy Maugans. This is Off Planet Radio of a sort, and it is the eye of the needle. How to describe this? It started out as a hashtag, doesn't everything now, and it wound up worming its way into my consciousness, into my dreams, into my conscious reality. And it began to form some concepts that I found interesting. And to describe it is sort of say it's sort of an act of foreshadowing. As we move into 2020, the century is no longer a teenager, is it? It's going to mature, it's going to grow. And we've gone through a very long period. For many of us, we've been in what's been called the awake crowd for some of us 25 years or longer. And I think a lot of us have watched sometimes and wondered if the world would ever catch up with us. And as dark as it feels and as painful a process as it's been, I do see that we are increasingly in a time when subtly below the surface, you're starting to see the outworkings of things dreamed for, hoped for, and planned a long time ago. And I don't mean by those who have continued to weave like the spider's web the traps that we have been put in. That's not what it is. But what we're doing is we're putting it out there as a vision. Holidays... and I'm not really a big celebrator, but things that we observe, rituals, they give meaning to our lives. They're like points along the way. If you think back on your life, it's likely you bookmark things according to events that were special. Holidays were family times. There were times when people got together and they shared food and gifts and company and camaraderie. And, for some of us, our families weren't quite that happy, and there was a fair amount of darkness and all that. But in all of it, the attempt is to consecrate the times and seasons and to bring meaning to it. And so the eye of the needle largely is pointing towards this period of time that we're going into. The more I looked at it, I realized that waiting until New Year's Day was not going to cut it, because really there's signs in the heavens that are giving us indications that we really are moving forward. I sort of bookmarked this going back to 2017 with the American eclipse that occurred. And what a mind-wrenching event that was. I mean, I watched it, and I watched it through a camera viewer, and I watched it through a shielded guard on the roof of my car. So I was watching an event through two different lenses, neither of which agreed with what was being seen in the sky. And the energy that day, if you remember it, I woke up that morning with a somber sense of something very heavy. And I think even people that weren't aware of exactly what was going on sort of got it. There was a stillness that day that was remarkable. Even though the world got up and did its hustle and bustle, there was a stillness in all that. And as that event progressed across the continent, there was a sense that something ominous, a specter, had occurred. And I bookmarked that as the time when things began to turn. The gears of the great clock in the sky shifted. And they shifted off of their time, because part of what we're doing with the Eye of the Needle study, which is going on our Patreon page. I haven't made any of this public so far, except for, I think, one show I did with Lindsey Hooper, who will be up with us shortly, and the interview that I did with Freeman last week. I've not talked about this a lot, but it's based on me going back to 2012, which is the other interesting little landmark in all this. And remembering an interview that I did with David Griffin in 2012, talking about his book, A Briefing for the Peoples of Earth. And when I started to look back through the book and I listened to the Griffin interview, and I'm not even a student of my own work a lot of times, I forget things. But I was going back for some reason through the 2012 archive and going, there were some interesting things that happened then. It was supposed to be a time of, the shifting of time again. And there were all these predictions and prophecies and things that were going to happen. Everything from mass ascension to mass destruction, which is basically the continuum of human life. We live between the worlds of birth and death. But I found this interview with Griffin, and I went back and looked for the book. And then, honestly, this book had disappeared, and then it reappeared. It literally fell in my hand one day when I was going through some books on my bookshelf. It dropped down into my hand, and I started to look at it again, and I realized how timely this was. What he talks about there with to understand what Griffin's outlining is basically we have been living in a time loop for possibly tens of thousands of years somehow. But it goes back to this thing called the game, where we played a game with another group that he calls the enslavers. When we finished that game, we had almost utterly destroyed each other as humanity. And some of us were healers, some of us tried to bring in healing. The enslavers, on the other hand, wanted a replay. And they wanted a replay with blindfolds on, which means basically we went in wiped. The thing about it is that they rigged the game. They rigged the game with what was called a probable futures database that basically programmed all the actions that we would walk through one more time, with the end game being that this time we would totally lose and we would be totally subjugated. Now, whether you look at this as a metaphor or you look at it as part of a cosmic game that's been played over eons doesn't really matter. The concept's still the same, that we have, in fact, placed ourselves into this construct in a way that we have been playing a game blindfolded. We have been put through endless cycles of birth and death and reincarnation, having our memories wiped and never learning from previous lifetimes. And when we hit this age, wherever you demark that, somehow or another, we began something that I'm calling the Great Remembering. Some of us came in this time kind of armed for this thing, sort of remembering certain parts, and as we've gotten older, we've remembered more. And for a lot of us, there's been a fair amount of trauma in all of this. Some of us have been through horrible things in our lives. And that's all part, I think, of this game as well, was to see if we could survive and prevail despite the trauma that we've lived through in continuous ongoing lives. And it is mass trauma. The entire world effectively was traumatized by these ongoing events over multiple lifetimes, and it's hardened characters. Those who were part of the enslavers group hardened themselves. They're now what we call the Illuminati, the Cabal, the controllers, whatever you want to call them. They're the ones that run the world under the wing of, let's just say, certain off-worlds types that have been shepherded in as well. And so what Griffin outlines in this book is basically where we're at now at this point in the game. In 2010, as a result of viruses that were placed into the probable futures database, that would be us. That would be us going back probably to the 1960s. And some of the people who were inside of black projects, basically infiltrated the Project Looking Glass database, which actually Project Looking Glass would be seen as the probable futures database. That was basically programs that harnessed human consciousness, running software simulation programs to predict outcomes. And when that program failed in 2010, and it was Bill Brockbrader, who talked about this on Project Camelot, and I got to know Bill a little bit before he was disappeared. But what he was talking about there was basically the demise of Project Looking Glass. As it went down, they went blind and they became increasingly more desperate and bloody in their attempts to gain control of the system again. But what happened was, as we came into 2012, a timeline that they basically had hijacked, we began to see the after effects of the failure of Project Looking Glass, which was essentially what has been called the Mandela effect. All these artifacts that emerged into the landscape and people having memories that didn't line up anymore and beginning to challenge and question the narratives that had been presented to us. And it gets us to the place now where we're looking at Tartaria. We're looking at all of these supposed resets that we've had. And what is that? Is it a glitch in the machine? Is it something that happened as a result of us sort of coming back into our knowing? The human consciousness is the key to opening up this entire thing. However you view the population of planet Earth, as being, bordering on 8 billion people. What we're seeing is a phenomenal awakening that's occurred, and certainly since 9/11/2001. That's where the thing really begins to unravel, because that's when people who had grown up in my generation, who had already lived through the 60s, who had already seen JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the assassinations, the riots, the Vietnam War, and had lived through what was the implosion of the Western economy, the U.S. economy, and the beginning of derailing the United States into a second world country, began to go, wait a minute, this doesn't add up anymore. None of this makes sense. And so the eye of the needle was basically to put this whole thing together, us threading our consciousness through a portal, beginning to compress the energies that are part of us. If you think about threading a needle, you take the piece of thread, you wet the end of it, and you kind of squish it up and you push it through that tiny little eye. All those threads form, all those fibers form that thread that goes through that needle. That needle then becomes the instrument that penetrates the matrix of a fabric. And essentially, that was kind of the vision that I got for all of this, that we really were kind of in this space where we had the ability, however large or small the numbers really are of those of us who are doing this, we have the ability now to do something very real to turn this thing around. And the enslavers, based on what I've seen, what I've heard, they don't know how to deal with this anymore. When Looking Glass shattered in 2010, they went blind. And we who have lived in this inversion, in this mirror, this upside-down world, are starting to take control first of our own consciousness and our own reality, which is an inner system, and we're now scaling it to synchronize with what we're seeing played out in the sky right now as we move forward into what I call the alignment with the Central Sun Navigator. We effectively are entering a period of time now where we have the ability over, I would say, the next 5 years to take control of this system and move the conversation and human consciousness into a new space. So that's kind of the summation of what this is all about. Take a break here for a couple of minutes and we'll bring in our first guest on the other side. This is Off-Planet Radio. I'm Randy Maugans, and let's hit it.
This is Tony Topping. You're listening to Off-Planet Radio.
Bring in my first guest tonight, somebody that this year I kind of got a chance to talk to publicly for the first time. She was very active for a few years in conference promotion and pushing the agenda for exposure of mind control programs. And we did a show together, I guess, back in the fall. And there was some really good things that came out of that. And so I want to bring Lindsey Hooper up. One of the things that I want to get tonight is what is most important right now in terms of what do we focus on? Where do we go? The history behind some of these holidays, and specifically the solstices, if you go back and you look at the various Druidic and pagan celebrations of it, are kind of dark. And our guest on the other side of this show tonight, WolfeAmos, will be with us. He's going to talk about that a little bit more. So there's kind of a balance in all of this. The balance in ourselves right now is to focus on the things that are most important. So, Lindsey, welcome to the show. And we talked about this earlier. Maybe you can kind of open it up by telling us a little bit about what you think is important and where our focus ought to be at this time.
It's just very pertinent right now, and very, very important and very significant that we all are aware of our thoughts, our minds, what we're putting into our minds. I know that a lot of people are tempted right now during the season to be on their phones or watch a lot of TV because, you're around family. But, I really want to urge everyone right now, especially with what kind of entities can come through the AI, to really unplug, because they are attacking the powers that be, so to speak, are attacking us right now very highly in the astral. And these technological devices are just gateways. Now, they're very weak. There's no need to be scared. They're very, very weak. And as long as your vibration is kept high, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, you talk about it, it's kind of a weak signal. But what it piggybacks off of is a lot of the other factors that have gone into this. GMO foods, vaccines, our overall health. I mean, I don't know how many people right now who, like me, have had some form of some sort of flu virus or whatever it is that's going around, which I believe has been laced into the spraying that goes on all over the country and all over the world. Exactly. But
I believe that as well.
Our etheric fields have been broken down tremendously, and they've done it on multiple fronts. So, part of the work is really in the physical, to take care of your physical self, to heal what you need to heal. And believe me, that's a challenge, because I'm doing it right now. I just had to steam my head open with eucalyptus to do this show, because I've been battling this sinus infection. So, it's a multi-front asymmetrical warfare attack on the human biology and on the etheric body as well.
Correct. And that's why I recommend to my clients elderberry, and also making your aura, and also when you go into the astral and the spiritual aspect, it's very important to protect, to shield, to build your aura up so strong that it becomes impenetrable. I actually did this before the show, so I am in a bubble that nothing can come through right now. So, and it's very important to practice that, and to keep your aura cleansed, things like this. So, yes, we definitely need to be aware of of what's going in, what's coming out, words, actions, thoughts, everything, what we consume, etc.
It's funny you brought up elderberry. I actually, over the summer, we have an elderberry bush in the garden here, and at the end of the season, I pulled all these berries off and made a tincture of it, which I've been taking.
Perfect. So it's definitely keeping whatever. It could be worse, right?
Oh yeah, it could be definitely worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what I want, what I would like to speak on right now, as far as, getting back to these, I know some of the viewers and listeners may have heard about the satanic, or they call it satanic rituals, that these people do, but it goes much deeper than Satan and religion. And this has been going on for eons, since the beginning of time. We're not allowed to see the very, very ancient texts. They lie to us and tell us the earth is only 1 million years old, which is totally not true. But they don't want us to discover the truth. That's why the perfect invention was the television and, and other distractions to keep your head down, and school. That's why, so many people are now learning that being self-taught is actually the best way to learn and become knowledgeable. If you don't question anything, you will never learn anything. If you don't question everything, you will never learn anything. So that's how I view it. So I've been in this field, avid researching these things for little over 10 years now. And I have always been aware. I've always been aware of these things that go on. I'm very affected by it. But being empathic, I'm claircognizant, all those things. And around this time is when I really have to unplug. If not, my anxiety goes to an all-time high because of what they are doing. They're attacking us in the astral. They're sending their little minions. But what is worse is what they're doing to the children.
Exactly.
And the babies. And this is why Creator is so angry right now. And this is why I believe, Randy, we will see the swamp drained. I do believe we will see the swamp drained. And I say this because humans only have a certain amount of time. You can't go around creating crap karma and expect to continue being served gold. Your gold star. Karma is not going to give you a gold star for too very long. You really, really, really got to reap what you sow in this next year. So not only does it go for the elites, but it also goes for us. Watch how you're dealing with your karma. Now, these traditions that they practice, they sacrifice, and I don't even like to say the name, they will sacrifice these babies, these children, and in awful ways. First, they torture them by disgusting means, which is very, even for me, difficult to talk about. I'm sorry, 1 second.
Yeah. No, this is...
Yeah. I mean, they rape them. They put them in boiling feces. And they do all of this before they kill them. And these are the people that you watch on television. These are the people that have been running our country and our race and our kingdoms for eons. And their time is up because we cannot go on any longer. And I know some people might say or think I'm crazy, but when you know the truth, when you have researched yourself, when you have seen it for yourself, these things will come to an end. But in the meantime, if there was ever a time to pray, I'm not a religious person, guys, at all. If there was ever a time to pray, start praying now. Prayer is meditation, that's all. There's a negative connotation to the word prayer because it's tied to religion. Let that go, guys. Okay? Prayer is the same thing as meditation. So Go into prayer, go into meditation. And we need to protect these children spiritually, astrally. That's why a lot of you may have been having dreams or flashes of really dark things involving children anywhere from 1 hour old, 1 minute old, to 21 years of age. Because that's for these sacrifices. There are different levels that they do. It's like from 1 to 7. And then from 7 to 14, and then they go to 21. And I think the highest they go up to is age 33. 33. As far as in these Kabbalistic rituals where they sacrifice these innocent souls to who they call Moloch. And Moloch is not Satan, guys. Moloch is something you would never want to meet in a dark alley. See, you have been lied to all of your life. And this is why I say you might think this sounds crazy. Like, I can't believe that, politicians and why would Hillary, why would she do such a thing? Why would this happen? Well, guys, they have her on film, doing such. And why do they do it? They do it because they believe in their twisted, sick minds and very, very low intelligence, by the way. They believe that giving this offering will protect them. And we all know that that never ends well for anyone. In every folk tale and every story you've ever heard, told, written, shared, it never ends well for the bad guy. It doesn't. Now, Moloch might be promising them this, but Moloch's time has run out as well, and this is starting to run out as well, and this is why we're being attacked so much lately, because they know their time is running out and growing thin. And that's why we really, and not only do they think that they're going to get all these rewards from him, they also believe that ingesting the blood of these children, especially infants, and they believe that ingesting it will keep them young forever, because it's called adrenochrome, and you can look it up, and it is on the market. You can buy it. They compare it to a drug that is complete euphoria.
Yeah, it's like super cocaine.
Exactly. And they say it also has benefits of keeping you looking at your best in your youth. Also, what was it? I'm trying to think. Sandra Bullock actually admitted it on the Ellen show, and you can find that clip on YouTube as well. She admits to, and Sandra Bullock is an actor, okay, Holly Weird. I call it Holly Weird. Hot instead of Hollywood. Sandra Bullock is an actor and actress, whatever you want to call her by. She admitted on Ellen that she wore circumcised. She's like, oh, I just had a facial, da-da-da-da. And Ellen was like, oh, did you get a mask? And she's like, heck yeah. Like, yeah, I did. She's like, oh, what kind of mask? And she's like, I'd rather not. I think she kind of hesitated at first. She really didn't want to say it. But Ellen got her to admit what it was, and she finally said, the blood of a circumcised penis. Like, and they're putting it in our faces, guys, and you think that's okay. So if you really want to think I'm crazy, or anyone saying this stuff is crazy, and Hollywood wouldn't do this, and a human wouldn't do this, go watch that clip. That clip right there shows you how sick and twisted masters of disguise. People are going to be really heartbroken about the Tom Hanks thing. You know, they're going to be really heartbroken about all these people, their idols that they worship, especially like the baby boomers, you know, and my heart breaks for them, you know, because they didn't have the technology and they weren't born in the day and age. They were more controlled, I guess you could say, more programmed. But yet, moving on.
Oh, but I think a lot of us did know. And I think there were enough of us that experienced the mind control and torture in that era that have, you know, sufficiently put the message out. There's actually 32 verses in the what's called the Holy Bible that describe this. The Moloch sacrifices causing the children to go through the fire. I mean, it's all over the place. There are these ancient Babylonian manuscripts that detail in pretty graphically. One is called the Glyptique Orientale, which shows essentially a procession of worshippers taking a child before the altar of Moloch. And when they did that was a brazen altar. So you can imagine the level of torture. We're not trying to be spectacular. We're not trying to be glorifying this in any way, except to say that, you know, we have to break this down. We have to put our own intentionalities, our prayers, our meditations against this. I mean, I think in recent years it's been kind of noticed by those who do pretty deep work in the spirit that these ritual sacrifices in some cases have been failing. And in some cases there have actually been interventions where the intended sacrifices have been reabducted at the last minute. So, I mean, there's work going on. This is spiritual work, and it's also going on in the physical as well.
Exactly. Definitely. I just had my friend Allie and I actually astrally kind of saw some things, and you know, it's whether you see it astrally, whether you look it up, because it's not just what you see or what you feel, guys. There are manuscripts. You can look up. You have the internet. Do your research. Just do it. You know, and then you have, you know, Randy, speaking of these ancient texts, then you have back in 2011, I think it was, or was it 2009? 9/11 kind of reference, but anyway, in 2009, I think it was, they found a book, and it told all about the life of Jesus, okay, from his death to his birth. And they discovered it in the caves of Jordan. Now, I saw that article. I read that article. And I was like, no way it'll be released. After that, you can't find anything on it whatsoever. And that's how they want it, guys. They don't want you to know who Jesus was and what he did. If you know, Buddha was enough that got out, that was preserved. You know what I'm saying? But if we were to know what Jesus really did and what he really stood for, and the things that he had discovered in the temple when he went to study, if we were to find that out, it would throw them off. The syndicate, it would throw the syndicate so far off of their throne that they think they're sitting on, because knowledge is power. And if we figured out, if the masses, so to speak, figured out that we had been lied to, you know, for eons, I mean, it would be chaos. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's this whole scripture in the book of Ezekiel where he remote views all these rituals. Yeah, I said that right. He remote viewed it. The prophets were remote viewers, and
yes, exactly.
He describes it in pretty graphic detail. These are ancient. You know, this blood sacrifice, this ritual, is what has enforced the matrix that's kept us entrapped. I mean, I don't think you realize that it's even part of the reincarnation loops. Imagine a soul that's tortured as an infant and sent back out to reincarnate, and how they control that, how they loose it, and how they re-harness that energy.
Exactly. You are totally correct, Randy. Totally correct. And then remote viewing, that's the thing. They remote viewed in the Bible. Read it, guys, in Ezekiel. You can. I mean, it's right there. I remote view. This is. I mean, I can. If the angels allow and my guides allow me, I can remote view into anything. That's how I was created. Yeah, it can be a blessing and it can be a curse. I mean, it can be kind of not a curse. It can be painful, so to speak.
It can be traumatic.
Exactly. I really want everyone to know that, this message, for me, and if it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, fine, go on about your life. Yet with this season, I really encourage you to, number one, unplug, really unplug. If you don't have family to spend time with, if you don't have friends, meditate. If you're thinking about taking your life, don't, because if you're listening to this podcast, you know what? You are meant to be a part of history that changes humanity and this world and this universe for the better. Because with knowledge, you can move mountains. You really can. And everyone has an experience, a unique experience that impacts this world on a level that is so profound that we can't even fathom at this moment in time, like the butterfly effect. And remember that, guys, remember you came here to play a role, and you don't want to get trapped in that, the karmic entrapment. You, like, as Randy was saying previously, you don't want to go back there. And like I said, unplug, spend time with family, tell people you love them, and raise your vibration. Just do the best you know how to do. And there's so many tools on the internet that you can find in order to evolve and be the best that you can be for yourself and the world that surrounds you.
So symbolically, let's move this a little bit, because we kind of went through the dark side of it.
Right.
But understanding and I've been talking about this throughout the course of the show. These seasons are important because we give them meaning. We live in this earth realm, and we have these two orbs, the moon and the sun. So we're in this, we're entering into solstice now, it's an interesting time. We basically enter into a period of about 3 days where the sun sits in the same position, and then it begins to shift back towards our cycles of increasingly longer days. So we've already gone through, as we're doing this, the time of darkness. And this period in between is sort of what I call an interregnum, a pause, a place where we can stop and survey where we've been. I basically view this as a solar new year. And I'm calling this entering into the eye, because I think this year going into 2020, which is obviously, the numbers again have meaning because we give them meaning and because we live in this space-time matrix. But we're entering into 2020, the time of vision, the single eye, beginning to see. And so, one of the things that we are noting in this show is the fact that this is a very important time for the truly conscious and awake to begin operating in their own power and to go through this eye of the needle, which means you're going to be compressed, you're going to be squeezed. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that and what it means to you.
Oh, wow, yeah. You're going to have highs, you're going to have lows, you're going to possibly feel like you're bipolar, you're going to snap at people you would normally snap at, you're going to have a temper all of a sudden when you've always been calm. It is going to be, and that's the side effects from, now there are good side effects too, and I'll get to that. Those are just the side effects of going through this, because with going through this eye, the needle, with going through it, okay, we have to understand that we are in a moving solar system, okay? We move through the galaxies. We move through the universe's galaxy, but we don't stand still and orbit, okay? We're constantly moving. So with that said, we are also getting DNA changes because we're getting the DNA uploads and upgrades, okay? We're going to be shedding skin. We're going to experience a rebirth of what we knew and how things are just, we're going to be evolving, and we're going to be evolving rapidly because of where we are in the solar system as well. You are actually going to experience an influx with heightened sensitivities, your spiritual gifts. That is another thing that we're coming into. If you are vibrating and you are aware and you are conscious and you are ready and you are responsible to take on the gifts to be activated, they will be activated. And when I speak about being responsible for the, in order to gain them, you must work on your karma, like we talked about in the last podcast, Randy. You must clear that trauma. If you're not clearing the trauma, you're not evolving. You're not healing. You're not removing the dirt, from your inside. So I really think that it's going to be a lot of chaos. But the main thing, if we ground, when we ground, we're going to be fine. We just have to always check ourselves daily. It has to be a daily thing, sometimes an hourly thing, depending on what situation we're in and what things we are moving through and at the time.
No, it is chaos. I mean, if you look at the world right now, I can't remember in my lifetime, which is longer than yours, the chaos that is swirling around us, the division, and just frankly the blind hatred that people are exhibiting and the anger. And these are outworkings, they're karmic outworkings, they're energetic outworkings of the structures of power which are falling. I mean, the book of Revelation, you have that declaration where it says Babylon has fallen. And that's exactly where we're at right now. This was the transit of that 2016 American eclipse, which passed over us as both an omen and, I will say, a solar mechanism as well that shifted the gears on the timelines. So what you're now seeing is all the blowback that's coming as a result of the shifting of the gears and the moving into this new period of time, for lack of a better reference point.
Correct. Yes, that was in 2017, and it was very,
It was 17. Yeah, sorry.
Same thing for me, Randy. You worded it beautifully. It was life-changing for all of us, I do believe. And things are going to be painful as we're moving through this. We're going to feel uncomfortable sometimes, but it's okay. You can work through it. It's not the end of the world. And tomorrow is another day. We always have to focus on that. We have to, we have to keep going and fighting the good fight. We have to, if we care about ourselves and anyone else or any soul, any being in this that has been in this karmic realm, so to speak.
Like you said, tomorrow's another day. They've promised us tomorrow forever. Hey, guess what, people?
Oh, yeah.
It's now tomorrow. It's morning on planet Earth. And you're passing through this new period. Things on the other side of this are going to look real different. And it's going to look different depending on where you position yourself on the continuum. Because the dark side is, I'll tell you truthfully, shared this with a friend of mine a couple of days ago. Remote viewed one of these high-level meetings. These people are scared shitless right now. Everything
Definitely.
that they've tried is not working out. They have no idea how to do this. And this is, on the scale of the political thing, there are no good guys. There are simply actors. So they're responding to people inside of their own system. They're going to impeach the president. They're going to do all of these machine movements to try and stir up another war. The war is on. The war in America is a mind war. And that's where we're at right now. This war now doesn't require armies. It's being engineered through the internets, the AI bots, and the information feeds that have run through us and are literally running through our bodies right now.
Correct. Definitely. Also, another point I want, to leave with this message as well is definitely I want to reiterate the importance of prayer and meditation, for sure. Yeah. It will save your life. It has saved mine. I will say that. It will save your life, and I'm not just saying it. It saved my life years ago. And we need to be praying for the souls that are in this karmic loop of entrapment. They don't deserve it. And only we are the only ones that can change this. The human consciousness has to continue to evolve and rise and raise in its own vibration in order for us to succeed. But mind you, while elevating our consciousness, we must remain grounded, because if you're not going to remain grounded, you're going to feel like you're in Mercury retrograde 24/7. That's why lately, I know every year on the holidays things get crazy. You'll see car wrecks, accidents. It has been like something I have seen out of a movie, how it's apocalyptic. And I think that people need to understand it's apocalyptic with the ambulances and the wrecks and the people dying right now. And people need to understand that the word apocalyptic doesn't mean the end of the world. It means a disclosure. It means a disclosure of knowledge and information. So I really want to clarify that.
Yep, we're in the apocalypse. And I'll just put to that when you're in a state of meditation and prayer, look at your body. Our bodies are incredibly powerful. And when we begin to use the energy, your body in a posture of prayer is a parabolic antenna to the universe. You're literally conducting through the energy fields your intentions and your powers. It's a very powerful concept to grasp.
Yes. I was meditating the other day, and my friend Allie had sent me a Reiki IET infused bracelet, and I held my hand out to the sun just to take a picture of it to send to her. And as I zoomed in, my skin literally looked crystalline. Different colors, rainbow. It was amazing. And Allie had been telling me about this, and I was like, okay, well, that's awesome. Like, my skin looks a little bit shiny lately, you know, but when I zoomed in, Randy, I was definitely taken aback, because I have it on my I have physical proof of it, you know, that we are evolving, that our DNA is evolving. This crystalline DNA is coming in for those that are responsible enough with these gifts and with this new DNA upgrades.
And see, this was the war on humanity. This is the war that has gone on for millennia, eons, was to keep us down, to keep us in this low compression of energy. And now we're expanding. And the interesting thing is we're going to expand as we compress, because when you put energy into a compression, you dynamically up the amplitude. So I'm trying to paint a picture here, again, of the needle's eye. You and I have been sharing back and forth some of these images of the sun and what's going on with that. And again, the sun is a manifestation. It is a portal. It is the primary power station. When we've gone through this darkness, and I know most of the countries had invariably crappy weather for most of the month of November and December, but I've been physically impacted by the lack of sunlight over the last 6 weeks, to the degree that it will make you sick. We are a part of this solar entity. And so it's real important that when we have the opportunity, we commune with that. And even if it's hidden behind darkness and clouds, you can still commune with that. This isn't sun worship. This is about understanding who we are, where we came from, and how we are part of this system. That is our energy bodies.
And I think that's why you feel that this solstice, soul, meaning sun, is the new year. And it's very interesting. And, you know, you speak of the eye of the needle. My fiance and I, we've been engaged for, 4 years, maybe 4 to 5 years. And we were driving up to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and we decided to, we're here with family, and we decided to have a hand fasting, and on the solstice. And if you had told me on December 20th that I would be having a hand fasting in the Blue Ridge Mountains, I would have said, yeah, right. You know what I'm saying? And these are the kind of things that are going to happen depending on which side you're on. Do you see what I'm saying? In 2020.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism there.
Yes. The miracles, the surprises, the joy.
Yeah.
Along with all the pandemonium, you will have these little miracles and these little blessings if you just continue to stay on track. Take care of yourself. Take care of everyone that deserves being taken care of.
What I want is for people to begin to observe the intense joy of this period. I think that's been taken from us to such a high degree, and
exactly, it sure has. It definitely has, Randy, and that's why they want it. They want it that way, because joy raises your vibration and consciousness so much, and that's what it's about, and that's why they try to attack on these holidays. That's why they go after our joy on the holidays by sending these things out. I mean, for example, I'm human too. I told no one to come in the room during the podcast. My fiance walks in the room. I'm like, oh my gosh. But this was before. Do you see what I'm saying? I was prepping and meditating. And I snapped at him. Like, I don't snap. I'm just not a snappy person. Like, do you see what I'm saying? They're going to do these things to derail you from having this joy, because when humans, when our consciousness is filled with joy, it's also filled with excitement, because joy and excitement go hand in hand. And excitement is very high, a high octave on the octave scale of, of vibration. So as long as they can keep your joy down, that keeps them continuing to do their bullshit. Excuse my French, but
it lowers our vibrational energy, and that's the whole point of it. Yeah. They take something like a holiday, Christmas being the big one, and frankly turn it into a commercial shitstorm. People just go insane this time of year. There's a sane way to observe things, and that is to stand back and impart. Doing what we're doing tonight with this show is largely an impartation of meaning to something. As I pointed out before, we seek meaning and we give meaning to things. They have rituals. They have dark rituals. They have ceremonies. They're doing spells and incantations. The way you counter dark magic is with white light. And so that's why we're doing this show, and that's why we're putting this information out. Some of it's dark, but we want to balance that because the message is that we tip the scales towards the other side. We are the light.
We are we are. We are the ones that are changing and have to change this world. So with that said, guys, put on your shields, your battle gear, things, and buckle your seatbelts. It's gonna be a wild ride, but it's gonna be a good one if your heart and your mind and your soul and your spirit's in the right place.
All right. Good message. Good stuff, Lindsey. Going into 2020, and thanks for coming on and sharing with us tonight. And,
thank you, Randy.
We send our blessings to you and your spouse and to your family, and for a new year of joy and increasing power to everybody out there that is in the light.
Thank you so much, Randy. That means the world to me. It's always a pleasure. Always, it's something that always makes me feel more complete is when we share this and when we have these moments, because we are doing them for a very specific reason, and we are making a difference.
Yeah,
and
we are.
So can everyone else. So,
all right.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Blessed solstice, and we'll see you inside the eye of the needle in 2020. Lindsey Hooper, thanks for coming on.
And we welcome you back to Off Planet Radio Live. I'm Randy Maugans, and thanks to Lindsey Hooper for coming on and sharing. She did that from a pretty remote location, thanks to the ability to get Wi-Fi over an iPhone. We were able to do that, and so we sort of overcome the boundaries of technology sometimes as well. It's funny because this technology can be so dark and sinister, and yet at the same time it's sort of empowered us to do things we couldn't do before. It's like Tuaath Danaan and his idea of the noosphere back in the early 20th century, the connection of human consciousness, and they couldn't stop this. They weren't going to stop it. It's the technology itself is really just stand-in for what we can do when we come into our full power again. The ability to, mind meld, to be able to communicate en masse in, let's just say, a more subliminal way would be awesome. There's technology that's far less toxic than what we have right now, too. And so it connects us, and yet at the same time, it's such a dividing line. We live in this world of contrast, this black and white. And it's a lot of what the human condition is. The human condition is the fact that we've lived inside of a mind control grid. We're in the solstice period. We're heading into the heart of the sun. And yet, long ago, they locked us into our heads, inside compartments. The first mind control programs were basically splitting the human consciousness. Go back and you look at Teilhard Chardin, and you look at the Cartesian split, mind-body dualism in the 17th century. And you go forward then into the 20th century, the mid-19th century, and the advent of psychology. And you have the creation of this subconscious mind, this concept that was basically coined by psychologist Pierre Janet back in the mid-1800s somewhere, who argued that underneath the layers of critical thought, functions of the conscious mind, there lay a powerful awareness that's called the subconscious mind. So they split us again. They compartmentalized us. They created this dungeon for certain functional aspects of our being that also compartmentalized a more integrated thought process. And, you go back and you look at the work of Julian Jaynes back in the 70s in The Origin of Consciousness and Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. He documents this, that at one time human beings were basically functioning on a bicameral mind that communicated hemispherically on a spiritual level. This was the phenomenon of the ancient prophets and the Sibyls and people who operated in the world of basically telepathy and foreseeing. Again, kind of what we're doing here. We're foreshadowing. We're pulling things out of the ether. And humans have been operating in non-unified consciousness for, again, roughly about 15,000 years. They split our minds. They split our bodies. They created compartmentalization. And then MK Ultra came in, and they even started slicing and dicing different personalities. And that is the world that we live in, but it's not the world we're going to live in because things are about to change. And let's see. I'll try to line this up here. I got WolfeAmos coming in here in a few minutes, and he's gonna talk a little bit more about some of the rituals and the aspects of solstice related to Celtic traditions, Druidism, and even the Tuaath Danaan. So that should be pretty interesting. We're on a music break here, and when we come back, WolfeAmos will join us for another interview segment. We'll be right back. We're going into this observance of the Winter Solstice 2019. I got to thinking about the traditions behind solstice, the obviously world-famous landmarks where solstice is observed every year. And one person that comes to mind is obviously somebody we've talked to a little bit this year in the context of rituals and Druidic magic and the Celtic traditions. And so who else better to probably inform the conversation of this observance than our friend who is located in the nether regions of Old England, Ireland, and the areas that have these interesting traditions. We welcome back WolfeAmos. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we were talking a little bit about the background and the deep history of these solstice observances, which you observe in a very interesting way, and they use the term observe here in the objective way, meaning that you are observing as to whether we celebrate and what we celebrate. That's another issue. But for me, looking at the solstice is understanding that man is a being who invests meaning into ceremonies, rituals, and symbols. And the richness of solstice, as it's observed in your native land, has some very interesting contours to it.
Sure has. No, it's a global phenomenon, the solstice being a time, a marker in time, which humans, unlike animals, we got captivated by these markers for securities, and we asked the question, what kind of a security would we need to know about a midwinter, or why would we place, as you say, a ritual around these events? Well, of course, simply put, in the summer it may have been a little more ad hoc, and maybe the jollies of the midsummer, as we know, the spirit of it is pretty high. But in the winter, walking naked, as we do, you've heard me talk a lot about Oscar Kisser's theories around us not having any fur, a coat of fur. Well, this midwinter time marker was most important, and of course being able to share the stores in the Celtic world with your natives and your friends at that time when little was around was quite a sacred act in itself. So we immortalized it with these traditions, and we've overlaid it, as we can see now, with Saturnalia and Christianity, but the hinge of it is the hanging on in the midst of that harshness in winter without a coat of fur. This is part of my belief, and obviously Kismer's belief in this regard. But also, like you said, there's a certain magic when that sun, as it ascends and descends throughout the year, for those 3 days it sits practically still on the same height, neither raising nor ascending on the horizon. And that in itself is a very peaceful time. I often laugh when everybody's manically shopping. I'm sitting quietly watching the ascent, or the lack of ascent and descent.
No, it is in an interesting kind of way, and I observed this a number of years ago. It's almost like an interim. There's like a pause there, where, and truly, if you observe it from a spiritual perspective, there's almost like a stillness to it.
There is a very much a stillness, and it is spiritual. I don't know what you captivate, or I'd be one of these sort of people who try and divide some of the darker arts away from, or all of the darker arts away from the mysteries and the traditions of our culture, because so much of it was based on survival. But also we added all this richness and context to that, and I find that fascinating. Timeless. I often think as well, on those 3 days, if you take time to observe it, there's a little bit of self-reflection, so you get to look at yourself in that time, in a stillness. That's maybe what a lot of people miss. A lot of people miss that stillness. The corporate world has our minds a little bit at that special time. I don't know if it's by accident or incidental. I'd say it's just incidental.
Oh, I think it's totally by design. I think it's designed, first off, because this is a season of commercial activity. It's a season when the corporations, the businesses balance their books. And so we go from red to black. Oh, the symbolism there. And the busyness of it all. The deep focus on frivolity at a time when we could, in fact, stop and be still and be one within the earth-sky creation. And I think that's lost in all of our observances. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to do this. It wasn't so much to, quote, celebrate as to observe and to take away from that some of the natural balance or imbalance that we found ourselves in the present era.
I hate to drag it down into the sort of the darker arts, but I suppose this is where I focus. And of course, Saturnalia is one of the four big sacrifice days of the year. And I didn't know that for a lot of years, and certain events sort of transpire, and I like to think that Christmas Day itself is very peaceful. But then I studied Saturnalia, and I realised it was one of the biggest days. And if you were part of a global elite looking to sort of shift dynamics in your own favour and expose what I've suggested, I was taught they were exposing a satanic age, then Saturnalia would be the day they would choose. And they would build all sorts of pomp and ritual around it for hundreds of years, like the birth of Christ. I don't know, I don't buy any of that stuff. But, you know, another side as well, that they're using certain traditions around the power of three. You know, when you look at the way Christmas moves as a two-week period, there's a lot actually happens in that midwinter. It's not just solstice or Christmas or Saturnalia or Boxing Day, St. Stephen's Day. We have in the Celtic world other traditions like Little Christmas, Women's Christmas, New Year, of course. And so it's quite a long, extended season, and there's a lot going on in there. And we could say that maybe there's a little bit of a distraction for everybody, as you say. So, yeah. One of the things I've been doing over the years is going to the sacred sites to wonder what the ancients were observing in them times. And what I found is in the west of Ireland is where I am tomorrow. And I'm in a county called County Sligo. And in County Sligo is a very, very large bay, and the Gulf stream literally pours into the bay there. And it's what's known as an early melt region. And it's also, because of its altitude and there's a lot of mountains, on the top of every mountain is a cairn, like a stone hut. And on top of every stone hut is a little stone cairn. And they're like these little sort of progression, how would I put it, like pyramids, but they're circular. But anyway, a lot of them you can enter, and as I said to you before, they're lined up for the winter solstice. So the Celts, or the Tuaath Danaan, were the traditional group that was supposedly the last historically to use these. They said they were the place of survivors. These were, if there was a tsunami or if there was an ice age and people had to converge in a mild temperate region, of course the northwest of Ireland and Scotland, very temperate, there's a strong gulf there to keep the weather temperate, and these are like, as I say, they're almost like a survivor's rescue hut in times of absolute desperate disaster, global disaster, you know, volcanoes, sort of tsunami, any of those major disasters. This would always be there. It wouldn't matter when in time. They'd be there thousands of years. The people who lived there left 10,000 years ago. So we got there, as I say, we took some observations of what they were witnessing. And what we found was that within the complex of the whole village, just a little bit further along, there's a cave. And there's a hole in the ground, and as you go down into the hole in the ground, you go into a cave. So we were in there, and on the winter solstice, the sun is just low enough to actually illuminate this cave at this sort of 40 feet depth. And it's quite a phenomenon, and only for those 3 days. So not only do the ancients try to line themselves up with the winter solstice, but there they had their natural time clock that they must have also found and used. And I think this is a regular phenomenon all through the Celtic area, this place of survivors.
So you talked a little bit about the Tuaath Danaan, and let's go a little bit into what you were talking about with me about the iron. And
yeah, this is a phenomenon. Again, I'm going back to the Kismet theory, because over the years, with it being such an extreme theory, sometimes the mind starts to see things, and I noticed this about mythology, that there's this phenomenon around iron. And one of the ones that the Tuaath Danaan, it's claimed, when the Fomorians invaded, the Tuaath Danaan, the history was that after the Great Flood, Partheon, I think was his name, was one of the settlers, and his daughter, Macha, was this first goddess, and she was the goddess of the battlefield. And essentially she was a cannibal queen. She used to take the body parts and she'd feed them back to the warrior tribes. And there was this battle between Balor of the one eye, Baal, and you can't make this up, and these Tuaath Danaan, and they fought. And all where we are is all the battlegrounds and their encampments and all. As I say, we do this tour and we go to some of the sites. So as this battle ensued, eventually they brought them back to the northwest, and they said, "Look, you're such formidable warriors that we'll leave you in this region." But as a culture, of course, at that stage they became the past. And what they said was that the Fomorians won because they were mad. They were mad with iron. Iron interfaced with the body and brain in such a way that it sent them insane. Well, if you study cannibalism as a tradition, that's another thing that they say very clearly, is that metal should never be brought anywhere near the body in the processing of the body. So we looked deeper into the culture that was there, and what we found in the studies in the 1900s from the digs was that they were vegetarian. There were no hooks, no spears, very, very, very little, and no animal bones, burnt animal bones, but there was broken open human remains. In fact, every bit of human remains there was opened up, broken open and scraped, skull, marrow, and there was a lot of human body parts in this area. So it appears that the Tuaath Danaan, as history says, they were ancestor cannibals. They cannibalized their ancestors. They had a certain wisdom and a power that kept them illuminated. I mean, this was their tradition. And it appears that there's a whole sort of spread of these different types of warrior clans, and that was what they were. And if you go a little bit further into it, a lot of gold was found. So they weren't ignorant people. They were very, very articulate, very highly cultured. They made beautiful gold ornaments and little deities, not deities, animal totems is what they were. Another part of the tour we do in the same area actually is a huge complex of 400 cranog, which are little islands on a lake. And on this lake they were growing through these flotillas directly into the lake. And in the next few days I'm going to be doing a few reports from some of the areas and show how they did a migration from this lake up into these caves and these cairn complexes and these villages, and it's historically written how they migrated through this maybe 10-15 mile area, but of course in them times that was a considerable area to migrate across. And of course we have a high elevated village and we have the low lake land, so it's quite a spread of their culture. And they left 10,000 years ago. That's when they vanished. Tuaath Danaan. They just their boats were found on the lakeside. Their flotillas were found at the bottom of the lake, as though they just disappeared one day. So we're not quite sure as to that. There's a lot more to those tales as well. Around, as I say, the solstice for these people must have been something, because the stones in these cairns are fabulously large. We know that they moved a ton and 2-ton stones. And even today, a group of humans to actually want to build, they'd have to really want to build these. And that's what I can see. These were special for these people. And why else would they be special, these cairns? If there were a time clock and they knew where the midwinter was, it meant they knew where the spring was coming and when they could be alleviated from their winter trials and in their nakedness.
So do you have the sense that ritual sacrifice was done, perhaps in these henges, that was an aspect to this, maybe even going forward into the Druidic era?
Well, there's a fabulous one in the middle of Ireland, in Meath. A lot of people know Newgrange, and in the centre there's a very large font that they've proved now must have been there. They built Newgrange over the top of the font, and a lot of people said when they discovered it, it was full of skulls. It was full of the morbid and it's a shame. We gloss up our history, and I don't think that the whole of our history is completely embellished with this. But I think that, as Kismet would rightly point out, there are certain influences, some of them extremely violent, some of them not so. Some of them maybe within their own framework of time, that the people involved had no real moral compass. You know, as an animal, human, this is just an action. It's not rationalised. Now, I'm not putting any credence to it. I'm merely showing this repetition and asking the question, why do we just keep ignoring it? Why when it's very obvious there's something, another layer deep? And of course the ego and the pride and our need to hold ourselves high in our achievements and our self-awareness now. And I do often say this to people, you know, don't be too put out by this topic, because look at where we've come now. As a species, we've come well through that. I know there are those that are dragging it back into this disrepute, and we can argue that on a different topic. But as a species, you know, there's so much phenomena we have done and enjoyed and been able to survive through, you know, together. And I think that's a lot of what the cairns are about. It's about people in adversity finding this elevated place. It's a shelter. It's stone. It's not much. By God, when everything's gone that you've known, that is sacred again. And it could have been sacred for how many millions of years, Randy? It wouldn't have had to have been 10,000 years ago. That was just when the last people left. You know, that could have, those cairns in the west of Europe could have been used for who knows how many hundreds of thousands of years.
It does make you wonder, though, the stones themselves and what they hold in terms of the energy, having borne witness to epochs of humans. I mean, from my perspective, everything is energy and everything is consciousness. And I understand that, you know, maybe the animists sort of corrupted this, but I do believe that there's something that's inheld in the natural forms, such as stone and nature, trees, that bears record to man's comings and goings long after, you know, we ourselves disappear from the historical scenes. And just to even commune with those stones, I mean, I do hope someday to be able to go to some of these places and observe them. But the sense, the presence of energy there, talk a little bit about that.
Well, this is an odd thing, because there are the stones do talk. There's a few books with that title, The Stones Talk. And just whilst I think about it, we had a little tale there a few years ago. My wife came with me up into the mountains. We decided to stay up there, actually, at this particular site in the west of Ireland. And this is our return to that site tomorrow. And when we arrived there, this is a true story. As we drove, because we have a four-wheel drive, and we took the mountain route, and as we came around the corner, just well before the sunrise, as you came around the corner, you could see the blueness, obviously, and the silhouette of the land as we come around. And we saw something that resembled a large black plastic bag blowing away from us. And it was twilight. There was enough seen that we both spotted it. And there was a pause, Randy, and my wife said, that was too big to be a crow. And I said, I thought it was a hare. And then we both realised that this, whatever it was actually, was quite large, and it had definitely moved as though it was a moving. And so this particular site where that part of the mountain range is, there's three major cairns. And so we wandered up all the same, just a little sort of quizzical. And I do go around each of them. The tradition is to go around each of them 3 times. So I would go around each of them 3 times. And sometimes, you know, with the singing bowl, I would perhaps bring something similar to the equation. And so my wife wouldn't be quite that way. And so she'd be doing her own thing, and I would be spending some time. And as we got to the 3rd one, my wife felt uncomfortable. And I wondered what was making her feel like my actions were making her feel uncomfortable. And I just asked her, she said, no, there's people in the cairns, can you not hear them singing? And I said, no, it's funny, because I had heard them singing. So we were outside the cairns, and it's a portal cairn, so there's only a little bit of room, and nobody came out, and we went in to find the people, because we thought there was people in there. And we both were quite shocked, actually, because we could absolutely archetypally hear some singing. And I'd kind of overlooked it, because I'd be used to people spending the winter solstice there, and that would be a normal sort of occurrence. But in this case, there was nobody there. and it's the sound chamber. There's one of them that's a portal. It's a long, you have to crawl in and out, and inside the resonance in there is quite phenomenal. And my wife was shocked, I must admit, because neither of us were expecting it at all, and nobody came out of it. And there's nowhere to go unless they went down. But that was what they said about the Tuaath Danaan, going back to the Tuaath Danaan, that they retracted into the cairns, their culture went into the cairns and vanished. And sometimes when you're there is a presence. And I think there's a crystalline form in stone that reflects events, and maybe even sometimes reflects events back out of the stones.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
And that was certainly an occurrence where I would suggest that we transcended somehow, unintentionally as well. Like, I wouldn't be chasing transcendentalism, but sometimes it does naturally occur. So there was something else I was going to mention there very, very briefly. Oh, I know what I was going to say to you, Randy. I'm not sure. I'm really looking forward to hearing your guests on this particular topic. But if anybody's interested, I'm going to be doing some videos on this, and hopefully, if the weather's with us, I'm hopefully do a video of the actual sun rising from the portal.
Yeah.
And I'll do about a 20-minute video, and I'll upload it to you guys, and we'll see if we can.
That would be completely awesome to be able to witness that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this solstice goes across obviously the international date line and crosses the Atlantic from where you are to where we will be when it occurs here. I kind of view this as a communal thing. It's a little sort of out of time, in terms of we can observe this from each our own stations, and it's sort of a watch. For me, the last few years of observing solstice has kind of been a watch, but it's been that kind of silence, that kind of dwelling in the nether worlds, the regions between light and dark, and this profound depth of communion with the natural forces. And as you've talked about, what we as the naked ape, as I guess we could term it from the work of Oscar Kismeret, sort of shows us is that we're wary of our place within nature, and we use nature as a way to kind of leverage some of the deficiencies that we have as a result of this, I guess, devolution of now somewhat being this oddity, this hairless being on a very cold and inhospitable planet at times. And that perspective lends itself very much to this watch of this awareness that we live inside of this mechanism of nature, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, I think nature's perfect in symmetry in the strangest and oddest way, because with our intellect, which we artificially created, as Kismeret would put it, this de-evolution, we've used that surplus intellect to counterbalance within the great whole. But none of this would be observable without that with that set of events.
Exactly. Yeah.
We would still be apes in a tree, essentially, if and we put the moral aspect to it. This is the interesting thing that I call back a lot of the New Age culture, and I say, don't be afraid of recognizing morality, because it's the morality and the clarity of truth that keeps us away from being involved or allowing dark arts to be prolific. We know they're there. They know they're part of time. And again, I mean, cannibalism is a dark topic because, of course, survivors have to force themselves to be involved in these arts again. So, this collision between necessity and desire and intelligence and the counters of that. Realistically, the human event is when people start to look at that dynamic of our path through the last few thousand years, humans will become a lot more empathetic, is that the right word, or at least compassionate towards each other's struggle. We won't perhaps look at each other quite the same, knowing that we had these trials in our histories and that we've all come to this place. And again, I do think, like you say, with the solstice and the cairns, they're a place where it's just a little period in time. It's a little silence, a little community come together, and it doesn't happen too much in a year, and it's just a very special one, the solstices. Another one is the equinox. Funnily enough, there's a good magic around the equinoxes as well, so we'll
and again, like I said at the beginning of the segment, we are creatures that create and live with meaning, and we also can revise those meanings. We can take the darkness of what you might call the fall or the de-evolution, and we can turn that into an observance of our own forward-moving evolution, or return back to some form of original nature and emerging into these cosmic forces. So when I talk about these things, I'm not so much interested in compelling people to believe what you or I might believe, or even what we observe, so much as to begin to impart meaning into it themselves, and to stop and use that as kind of a place to pause, meditate, and allow themselves to realign to some of the natural forces.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've talked to you about it before, the medicine wheel, that's elemental. And funnily enough, I think this is the same. I think we're elemental. And maybe this is just a little bit of what we need for our securities, is this elementalism. And the motion of the seasons, the motions of the times of a day. There's a little phenomenon that I always, when I worked at, is that certain parts of the body are active at certain parts of the day.
Mm-hmm.
The body system in the winter is different from the body system in the summer, and some of the things you consume. And I just think that the ancients must have really known this, because they were much more in touch. And fasting is another phenomenon that we don't do these days, but they knew. Was it necessity is the mother of all inventions?
Yeah, fasting, feasting, understanding even the effects of the lunar orb on our bodies. We have these two orbs in our sky that between them seem to have some sort of pendulum effect on us, and even on our consciousness. And so that's kind of what we're talking about on the show, is the impartation of meaning and a structure of understanding ourselves in a greater context. My friend, as always, you bring something unique and wonderful to a conversation, and I want to thank you for that. Anything else you want to add before we head off into the Cairns?
I'd just like to say thank you very much for having me on, and have a great solstice. I hope that your new year brings you all that you wish for, and to everybody out there, the same.
And to you also, my friend.
And I'll check you with these videos very soon.
So on the solstice, we point to the coming of a new time on this earth. And we're in this critical phase right now. The compression of passing through the needle is intense, and so we're going to need to align ourselves with healing, restoration, shadow work, learning to move into the multi-dimensional aspects of our innate beingness. The so-called judgment is the scale, and it's the scale upon which we lay our own inner struggles when we operate in love, forgiveness, and divine understanding. The goal is to be healed, then to become healers. There is no religion, no savior programs. We are the saviors of one to each other, even to the healing of the traumas of those who have oppressed us. The truth is out there, it's inside you. You are. The Eye of the Needle. I'm Randy Maugans. This has been Off Planet Radio. Good night.
This is Off Planet Radio.